Hello, everyone. As I see, we have 27 watching so far. So we have one in the chat already. Tell us where you're viewing this from in the chat. We want to see so we have Richmond, Virginia. So there we go. I know we're a few minutes early, but we wanted to make sure that we were on before everybody jumped on. We have 19 watching. I know we're going to have more coming on as we start. Oklahoma City, wonderful. Memphis, Tennessee, excellent. We'll get started in about 2 minutes, and then I'll introduce our speakers today. There's Maria, Capture One trainer in the chat. Hello. UK, there it is. I knew somebody from Europe, and there's Stockholm, Sweden. So wonderful. And there's Liz from Boston, hanging out with us from Boston today. So Maria, which is Capture One trainer, and then Liz, they're both in this Zoom call, which is now being broadcast out to YouTube. So if you have any questions, please put it in the chat. I'll make this announcement again, but please put it in the chat so that way we can answer that whenever we're going to answer questions. Florida, Tom from Florida, wonderful. Another one from Wales. All right. Hey, Mark. But yeah, tell us where you're from. Tell us where you're viewing this from here in the chat. And again, if you have any questions or comments, please put it in the chat function. We want to make sure that we're getting to those, when we're going to do that. I'm not sure if Maria is going to have some breaks in between, or we're going to do it all at the end, but we're going to make sure we get to as many questions as possible today. Springfield, Missouri. Hi, Alyssa. So real quick, I want to say like and subscribe. This is a really cool space to put out for live events and other giveaways. We actually have a gift card giveaway that we're doing, and we have some other giveaways planned out for the rest of this year. But also for those of you that have not used Capture One, go to Capture One's website and download that real quick. There's a 30-day trial. So load in your images. We want you to play with your images while Maria's going over these tips and tools here. And if you go to bedfords.com, you can purchase a perpetual license of Capture One there. So go ahead and do that if you're interested. And then, so it looks like it's 11 o'clock here Central Time. Liz, do you have anything you want to let everybody know about?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for Tyler for hosting and Bedford's for hosting. I just want to reiterate what Tyler said. Definitely check out the free trial at captureone.com if you have not already, and bring in your own raw file. Just make sure you check back in with the team at Bedford's. They can get you a really good deal on a perpetual license. It's Capture One 22. It's one user with 3 activations. So I just wanted to share that with you guys, but definitely check back in with your friends at Bedford's. They'll take care of you guys.
Forgot to unmute my mic. Okay, absolutely. Thank you, Liz. And then our host today, we have Maria. Maria, hi.
Hello.
Here she is. Maria, I'm excited about this one. Portraits are an exciting thing just because everybody likes to photograph. It doesn't have to be just paid work. It can be ourselves, it can be our friends or family. So I think this is very applicable to most of our audience out there, hopefully everybody. Maria, is there anything else you'd like to say before we get started?
No, definitely. I think you made a very good point. That's nothing about portraits, just as this saying that you do when someone is paying you. We are all taking portraits of people every day all around us with, like even from the stupidest selfie to, taking a photo during your holidays with your family, with your partner, whatever. And just think about it as something that's going to help you improve these kind of photos. It doesn't have to be like a super professional editing. It might just be something you do for fun. And actually self-portraits are also very fun to play around with too. And I do take a lot of those because it kind of helps you to, like see yourself with a different set of eyes, which is usually really nice.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm excited to, I don't know your notes. I don't know what you're talking about, other than the title of this. So I'm going to be learning with everybody else. And also I do want to note, I know people are going to ask this is being recorded. So if you have to step away, if you need to come back later, not a problem. This is going to be on YouTube, so you can watch it again later, or fill in your notes that you may have missed. So this is being recorded. You can watch this again later. So Maria, I'm going to let you take it over from here.
Fantastic. Thank you for the introduction. Okay, so let's get down to it. Today, I'm going to be taking it up a notch, actually, because this is the last of a 4-part series that we've been doing here in the YouTube channel of Bedford's Camera. So if you missed all the 3 sessions, I do recommend you to check it out if you're interested. There is a general intro. There is one specifically about workflow and organizing your files. And the last one that we had right before I left on holidays was about landscape editing. So I hope you watch those. If not, it's not a must, but it's a nice have. And as he said, this video is going to be staying here. So if you want to rewatch it or like rewatch it after you've seen the rest of the classes, then that's good news. But yeah, this is like the last part of the series, and I wanted to take it up a little bit. I will be doing it slow, so I'm sure that most of you, or hopefully all of you, will be able to follow, even if though you're not Capture One experts. But yeah, we'll be introducing some more complicated concepts, like not complicated, maybe just complex, so to say. So if you watched the last series, the last part of the series about landscape editing, you see that I started talking about a concept that I kind of call funnel editing. And it's a whole idea of editing where you would go like a funnel, like you start on the top with the widest, with like the basic adjustments or like composition, and then you move on to light and contrast, and then you move on to color, and then you move on to kind of the more specific adjustments, the one that you would do with brushes, with masks, with layers. Yeah, and keeping this workflow for editing, what it helps me to do is not only, well, have like tidy layers and so on and so on. It also helps me to think before starting to edit on the image. We have this temptation sometimes. We see an image that we like, and we just want to go like straight to it, and we are all over the place, and we touch all the sliders and all the tools and all of that. And most times that is really not necessary. We just need to kind of have a plan and have in mind where we want the photo to get to. And then by following this method, this organized method, in my experience, it's easier to do so. And there were some comments on the previous video saying that that was useful. So I'm going to stick to that method for today's session. So without further ado, I'm going to now share my screen, and I'm going to show you what I prepared for today. So can you all see my screen all right? Oh, by the way, I will be taking a look at the chat every once in a while. So if there's any questions that are related to the specific concept we're talking about, I might take a little break in between just to answer some questions. And if you have any other questions or something that, needs a little bit more developing, then just put them on in the chat at the end, and then I will try to answer as many as I can. Okay, so I said this is my screen. This is my Capture One interface today. These icons are kind of new from the last build, so it might be that they're looking different for you. But anyways, the tools that we're going to be using are exactly the same. So it doesn't matter if you don't see these icons in the same way. The same tools are going to be on the interface. Okay, this is the photo that I want to be using today. This is already edited. Something that I wanted to let you know before we start, I'm sure I mentioned this in previous sessions, but just in case someone's new to the party, I just wanted to let you know, don't be afraid to experiment, to push things super far away, because this is all non-destructive editing. It means that you can always go back to the beginning. You can always go back to your raw file if you don't like it and just start all over again, or just like undo some layers and stuff like that. So if you go a little bit too far and you're not satisfied, don't worry, it's all non-destructive and your raw file will be completely safe. So just to prove you that, this is the edit I made, and then I'm going to reset it. And this is the original raw file. And this is what we're going to be start to work from. And hopefully we'll get to a result similar to the one that you just saw. So yeah, let's do it. Talking about this funnel technique, the first thing I like to do is to work with composition. So even before I go on to things like exposure or contrast, I take a look at the photo and I say, okay, so is this the right composition for it? Is this framing guiding the view towards the subject, or is it kind of distracting away from it? So in this case, it's kind of like the latter. There is like a very wide frame and there is like so much air on top here that is really not bringing anything interesting to the table. So I'm just going to crop this photo. And at this point, I would just do the cropping, the rotation correction if needed, and also the keystone if needed, which in this case, we're doing portraits and it's not needed. But if we were shooting something like architecture, it might be, probably will be the case that we need to do it. So I would start there, like just take a look at the global photo and try to see what works. So we can do cropping from different parts of the interface. I typically tend to use this shortcut here with the cursor tools on the top part of the interface. We can just take this tool, these handles will appear, and by default, it will come in the original aspect ratio. Now for this kind of photo, I tend to do 4:5. There's a reason for that. 4:5 is traditionally the aspect ratio that is being used in many magazines and newspapers. So when I'm doing like portraits or like kind of more like, well, this is not my photo. I'm just using it for demo purposes because it's perfect. But yeah, when I would do something like people, photographing people and kind of like editorial-ish kind of thing, I prefer to go for this aspect ratio because it just looks natural, it just looks good. And it adapts nicely also when you are doing like a closer portrait, it adapts nicely to the shape of the face and the body. So I prefer to use this one rather than more panoramic ones. Same as when we did the portrait part, I was cropping in more panoramic aspect ratios like 16:9 or something like that. There were some questions about that in the latest session. So yeah, I wanted to explain where this aspect ratio that I'm choosing today is coming from. Okay, so I'm going to do that. Okay, that's nicer. We got rid of so much air that we didn't need in there. We still have some information here on the right and maybe just a little bit more air on the left side. Yeah, something around there. I think that's going to work. We actually need to crop it. So I'm just going to grab the handle from here and yeah, kind of trying to straighten it up. Okay, I think that works. So we did the composition, the first part of this funnel. Let's move on to the next part. The next thing I tend to do is to work only with light and contrast and forget everything related to color. Just by doing it in this way, it allows me to be a little bit more selective with what I'm doing. And also another benefit of that is that sometimes you're just mixing too many adjustments and they're kind of canceling themselves or like potentiating one another, and you end up with this like whole mess and you have like weird effect and you don't know where that's coming from. So this will help you avoid that kind of feeling that you don't really know where everything's coming from anymore. We could just go ahead and start editing with the background layer, but as I said, I'm going to take it up a notch. So I'm going to be using a different way to use layers today. So instead of using the background layer, because what happens with the background is if we just overdo it completely and then we want to go back, the opacity slider doesn't work here. Whereas if I start with a new fill adjustment layer, just a quick reminder, a new fill adjustment layer will give you a mask that covers the whole image. This is exactly what I wanted to do. You see the layer appeared here, and I'm going to call it basic adjustments or basic or whatever. So we have this layer for basic adjustments. And the benefit to this is that now if I completely overdo it, I have the opacity slider ready to help me if need be. So that's the typical thing that I start to do when I work with, it doesn't matter if portraits, landscapes, product photography, whatever it is, this is a nice technique to keep in mind. So the first thing I want to do here, as I said, work a little bit with contrast, with exposure. Let's see. First of all, probably I'm going to take up the exposure like a couple of tenths of stop. So to make it overall a little bit brighter. Then the next thing I do We could work with the contrast slider, we could work with the levels. In this case, for portraits, I rather work with the curves, and there is a very simple reason behind that. So we have in the curves, this is like a very capsule specific thing, and I think it's very, very powerful for portraits. So we have this RGB curve and we have the Luma curve. The difference between those two is that RGB is going to work with all channels at the same time, while the Luma curve will only work with luminosity. So let's see the difference between those. I'm going to just clone this variant so we get a virtual copy of the same photo. Don't worry, the file is not actually duplicated. This is just a virtual copy. And in the first one, we're going to use the RGB curve to create a little bit of contrast. So somewhere around there. Maybe that's a little bit too much. Okay, so something actually believable, somewhere around there. You see, the problem here is that because you're working with the different channels independently, there's an undesirable effect that we're going to get in portraits, which is the reds and the yellows, but specifically, mostly the reds, are going to get widely saturated, like a really weird saturation in the reds that is not going to be corresponding to the rest of the image. You see the magenta here is also kind of going nuts. So that's what's going to happen if you use the RGB curve with a portrait. On the other hand, we have variant number 2, and what we're going to do here is to use the Luma curve instead. So let's do, again, the same kind of curve, this S-shaped curve. You see what happened here? You see the both variants. I'm going to make them full screen so you can appreciate actually the difference. So on the left, we have this, this variant with the super saturated red and the crazy magentas and all of that. And on the right, we have a photo that it still has a very nice contrast, but it's slightly desaturated. The difference between those two is that because you work only with the Luma channel, you will not get the colors affected, and that can give you this kind of desaturated look. But the good thing about that is that if I now just increase the saturation slightly, then I'm going to get that saturation back that I need for the other colors while keeping a healthy skin tone. And in this case, also, we have this orange wall on the outside, which is not going crazy radioactive like here. So this is a much better starting point. Just use your Luma curve, and if you feel that that gave it like a desaturated feel, just increase saturation between 12 or 15 points. And that's going to give you back a very nice basis and a very healthy skin tone to start working from. Of course, this is just the beginning, and then we're going to build on top of here. So for those of you who are not familiar with curves, by making this S-shaped curve, the thing that I'm doing actually is just increasing the contrast. Also, the thing is that if you, one of the reasons I like to work with curves is that you can have a lot of control over where you're saturating or where you are contrasting. So for example, if I take it to the right, I'm going to be adding a more dramatic contrast in the midtones. If I keep it towards this side of the picture, it's going to be much more subtle. It's going to be affecting only the blacks. So typically I tend to work around these two dots, these two lines, intersections. You can see there is these lines. They actually correspond to the same fragments that you see in the histogram. So that might be helpful. So yeah, just working with those, trying to keep it around these intersections. So on the left, slightly down, on the right, slightly up, and that's going to give you some extra contrast. I think I still kind of need a little bit more saturation. Okay, there's that, and I think that's a good starting point. So what happens now is we have a nicer contrast, but we are kind of lacking a little bit of details, specifically in the shadows. So one thing that I really tend to do, again, doesn't matter for portraits or for landscapes, is I work with the highlight and shadow sliders and the curves all together. And it's kind of this back and forth where you are adding contrast, but then bringing back some of the detail. And that, in my experience, helps you have a photo that feels contrasted, that feels sharp, but also keep a lot of details in the shadows. So that's nice. Maybe a little bit more highlights over there. Then we can also recover some of the highest highlights over here. So that's going to give you like a balance. So I only use, well, actually these three tools. So the Luma range, the Luma curve, the high dynamic range, and the exposure and the saturation. And that already gave me such difference. Maybe it's a little bit too contrasted. So that's why it's good that we have the opacity control, because then we could just bring down the opacity, and I think about 80% is going to be right, because otherwise it's maybe a little bit too much. So maybe around 75, 80%, that's going to be a good balance. The adjustments are going to mix in nicely with the background, and that's going to give us a very good starting point. So that would be the second layer of our funnel, working with only light and contrast, and then we will move on to work with color. Before doing that, I wanted to answer a question that is relevant to this. So how did I make the virtual copy? It's very easy to do. You just go to the thumbnail, right click on it, and then you have this option to clone the variant or to create a new variant without any adjustments. So that's the way you do it. Okay, back to our 60s kind of editorial model guy. Another thing that we need to keep in mind while we go through this process is keep looking at the before and after, because that's going to help you understand where you were coming from, where you're getting at, and if you kind of getting lost along the way. So you can do that either by clicking this button on the interface. You have different options. You have this or the split view slider. Typically, what I like to do, instead of using this one, I tend to work with the full view slider and just press the keyboard shortcut to toggle it on and off very quickly. So that's letter Y. So that would give me a very comprehensive view of the before and after. And that's what I typically tend to do. Okay, so let's move on to work with color. The same way that I created a layer for basic adjustments, I'm going to create another full adjustment layer because I don't want to mix the color and the basic adjustments here. Okay, so same way again, I have a mask covering the whole image, and then I would move on to work with color. At this point, I just wanted to mention that this is actually a Fuji file. So we could simply use one of these film simulations by Fuji, which are amazing. So you see, you have all of these super nice starting points with different kind of colors. And some of them I really, really like. Specifically for this photo, I think we could do with classic chrome, for example, or maybe the classic negative. It would look very nice, but I don't want to cheat because I know that not all of you are Fuji users, so I'm going to just do it the old school way by manually adjusting the color grading. So before I do the color grading itself, I like to work with the white balance, and we don't need to do a neutral white balance at all. We can just use it as a basis of where we want to start working. And here I want a little bit more of a warmer starting point. So just grabbing this slider, moving it slightly towards the right. It might be that then we need to adjust the tint. In this case, I'm going for kind of like a vintage look. So I'm going to be working towards a little bit more like green tones. And, you know, it's just like a matter of personal perception. Like we see these kind of vintage look photos tending to be more towards a green tone. So that's what I'm going for. Of course, color is something very subjective. So this is before and this is the after. And let's just do something a little bit more complex. This is just the basis to work with. And then I'm going to be moving on to another tool that I really like. It's a color balance, and that will help me do a color grading on the image. So here in this tool, we can work with shadows, with midtones, and with highlights. And it's just a very simple way to work with color. So I'm just picking the tone that I want to use here. And then with the left slider, you can increase it until you get the kind of saturation you like. I'm not going to leave it like that, but I just want to I know that I'm going to make my shadows cooler. Probably around this cyan tone is going to be nice, but of course that's too much. So now I just pick my tone and I'm going to decrease the saturation and then just bring it on step by step. If you want a more comprehensive walkthrough how this tool works, you can rewatch the previous video where I explain it in depth. But for now, just keep in mind, you do shadows, one tone, and then I'm going to just use the highlights, another tone. And that's going to give me the color grading I need for this kind of vintage look. So that's looking nice. And then on the highlight side of things, what I'm going to do is compensate this color grading with a warmer tone, with something that's going to sit around the opposite side of the color wheel, meaning that's a complementary color, meaning that's probably good news. So this will be more or less actually around here, that will be the complementary color. I'm going to be focusing more on the yellow side of things, around there, like a warm yellow, and then again decreasing it and just a little bit on the highlights. Also keep in mind that it might be, if you go too crazy on color grading the highlights, you might get a weird skin tone. It might be what you're looking for, or it might be that you're screwing it around. So I'm not sure if I'm supposed to do that, to say that, like, never mind. Sorry guys, I'm not a native speaker, I do my best. Okay, so we got the color grading going on here. Let's see the before and after just of the color grading. So this is the before and this is the after. Again, it might be that I took it a little bit too far. So I'm going to pull down the saturation just a little bit, around 85 maybe. Like, let's do, yeah, I think around 80, it's gonna be all right. So again, let's move and see the before and after of the whole thing. You can do it like on the top side of the interface with your cursor or with the letter Y on the keyboard. So before and after, we've come a long way with some minor tweaks, as you can see. So that would be like the basis of the photo. That would be the next step in the funnel. So what we're moving on now is we're going to be fixing the specific things, like the little things. So let's things like the skin tone, things like this super crazy difference in the skin tone that we have from the face to the hand. For those of you who are wondering where is this like super weird magenta cast coming from, it's probably not a cast. I was not there during the session, but it's normal that we all have different skin tones in different parts of our body. And when your hands are purple like this, it's probably an indicator that you are really cold. So that guy was probably really cold when this photo was taken. So someone was not taking care of the actor on set. Anyways, let's just fix that in post-pro. And it's going to be fairly easy to do so with the different layer system. So how to do that? We can do it in different ways. Probably the easiest, that's also the laziest way, which is probably good when you have a lot of photos to edit. It's just to create a mask here and then work around with the color selection. So let's do it. Let's create another layer for fixing this hand and this cast. And in this case, we're not going to be creating a new filled adjustment layer, but a new empty adjustment layer. What that's going to give us now, if I press M on my keyboard, you see nothing's coming up because there is no mask really. And then what we have to do is what we have to create a mask on our own. So we have this radial gradient that we're going to use now. It's here together with the brushes. So I'm just going to make a radial gradient just like that. And now we need to invert it because by default it's on the outside of the mask. So we want it to be on the inside this time. So to do that, well, I'm first going to give a name to my layer, making sure it's all nice and tidy. So, and then I'm going to right click on this layer and click on invert mask. So with this now I can control feathering and I want like a really, really soft layer and I can rotate it and kind of make it match around the area that I want it to match. And don't worry at all if the mask is not perfect, because you can tell me here, okay, Maria, but you know, this mask is like getting completely out of the hand. It's going to mess the rest of the things like the sweater and stuff like that. Don't worry, it's not going to, because the clever thing is just to mix this mask selection with a color selection. And that's going to be like the perfect symbiosis for this. So now I can stop seeing my mask. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use another different tool to work with color, which is the color editor. We have different color editors. There is a basic one to work with wide ranges of color, and there is the advanced one to work with more specific part of it. And then we have the skin tone, which you could ask me, so why are you not using the skin tone color editor for this one, if that would be like what makes the most sense? But don't worry, I'm going to get there. For this time, I'm just going to use the advanced one. So I'm going to use the advanced color editor here, and I'm going to pick a sample of the color that I want to correct. So probably around this cast, you see that it's like very brightly pink. Just to make sure that you see what I'm doing. I'm clicking on this button, like view selected color range. So you can see that all of this color range is selected. The color that is selected is represented graphically here on this color wheel. And it doesn't matter that this part of the window is selected. It doesn't matter that the face is selected, because it's only the intersection of this color selection with this mask what is going to get affected, which is, in my opinion, really brilliant as a way to work with layers and color together. So let's go back to the original and let's see what we can work here. So first of all, we have the hue, and we probably want to be working with that, and we probably want to be pushing it towards like a greener side of things so that it will roughly match the face. It doesn't need to be exactly the same right now, but just something that gets a little bit closer. Then we probably need to also work with the saturation. So if we overdo it, that's going to be super crazy. But if we stay somewhere around there, that's actually nicer. Yes, so somewhere around there. Now it roughly matches the face. And in any case, this is an improvement over what we used to have. Still not perfect that it's coming in 2 different layers, because then I'm going to use the skin tone color editor to work together with the hand and the face and make sure they match perfectly. So this is a rough basis, and I think that's fine. And then I'm going to move on to work with the skin tone color editor and see how that brings everything together perfectly. So for doing that, I'm going to use again the same technique. I'm going to start with a different layer, and I'm going to do a very rough gradient mask, and then I'm going to use a color selection to focus on what I need to focus. So again, here on my layer panel, new empty adjustment layer. And then I'm going to be using another gradient. So let's press M just to see the mask. M is a shortcut in the keyboard for showing and hiding the mask, if you were wondering. And again, I need to give it a name. So skin tone. And again, I'm going to invert it. So right click, invert mask. I know that I'm touching like a lot of tools, a lot of buttons, but this is just to show you like the general workflow that I follow for my edits. And by repetition, you're going to see that eventually you're just going to get this, and it's just going to eventually be what makes sense for you. You have to do it like a couple of times as practice, but then in the end, it will stick with you. And again, playing around with the shape of this mask doesn't need to be perfect, just needs to roughly match my skin tone here, probably a little bit wider. And yeah, let's see. I think that's somewhere around there. That's going to be perfect. Okay, now we have our rough mask. And now the same thing we're going to be doing again is to choose a color selection. This time, instead of the advanced color editor, we're going to be using the skin tone color editor. The interface looks like the same. I know it can be a little bit confusing if you've never used this tool before, because it's like not so intuitive. I give you that. There is like this blank circle and all of these grayed out sliders. And if you're new to Capture One, you're going to say, okay, what is going on here? I can't do anything. But the only thing you need to remember is there is this dropper icon right here, and that's the tool you need to start working with the color editor. And you see that there's like this helpful tip showing up if you need it. You can also turn it off if you are power users, but just for the sake of showing you how it works, I turn it on. Then we pick this dropper, and then we need to pick a sample of the skin tone. What sample you choose, it's going to have an effect on the final result, so keep that in mind. Don't choose a part that is like dark or too light or like has a weird cast or like right underneath the eye. Just pick a color sample that from a neutral point of the skin, the kind of sample that you want the whole skin to resemble, kind of. So typically, I don't tend to use the cheek specifically, but somewhere around here, something that is like not too saturated, not too dark, not too bright, just kind of neutral. So around here now, again, once I picked my sample, this color gets represented in the color wheel. And then we, just for the sake of refining, if we need to, we just view the selected color range. And we see that all of this tone is selected, but again, don't worry about the window or the background. That's not going to have any effect because it's not within our mask, or it's mostly not within our mask. It's going to be very hard to notice. And then I don't think we need to refine anything on this thing. Oh yeah, actually we do, because you can see, so I'm going to zoom in a little bit. You can see how part of the lips is also selected, and we don't want that because we're going to be doing some uniformity adjustments. And then when it's all uniformized, then the lips are going to appear like orange or like gray or some weird thing like that. And we typically don't want that. So let's try to take this out of the color selection so I can show you how you refine the selection. So in the color wheel here, you can just keep out of the line whatever you don't want to be there. So in this case, this was a tone towards the red or the magenta side of things. So if we spread the selection, you will see that more gets selected. If we refine the selection and we close it down, we're going to see that this part of the selection eventually disappears. Oh, we also got rid of kind of some parts of the hand. So let's try to work for a balance. Yeah, I think that's a good balance. That's a good compromise. And then now we can work with the hue, the saturation, and the brightness, and the uniformity, which is the specific special feature of the skin tone editor. So let's see what goes on. If we're not really sure where we want our skin tone to be, just go all the way to the right and all the way to the left and see what works for you. Because I made a color grading towards green, the green side of the color palette, it might be that the skin tone was a little bit too green. So if I go over to this side, it's going to be too green. Maybe what I can do is kind of bring back some of the warmth in that skin, even though like the whole look is going towards this desaturated green look. It's good probably to keep some healthy redness and warmth on the skin, because if you make someone too green, then it's going to appear like they're sick, and we typically don't want that. So trying to recover some of this warmth, maybe saturate the skin tone a little bit, something around there. The brightness or the lightness, as it's called here, typically I don't like to work with, specifically when I'm editing photos that were shot in controlled environments, because it's just better just to work with the lights instead of just doing it in post-pro. But yeah, that's a good basis. And now to bring back together the hand and the face, what we have here are the uniformity sliders. So what that's going to do is going to just take everything towards the initial sample. So I'm just going to completely overdo it for you to see the effect. So you see how that is the initial hues, and those are just being pulled together to match that first sample I drew with my dropper. So same with the saturation. If we do everything like 100%, it's going to be super weird and unnatural. But if we play around with it wisely, we're going to get very good skin tones. So somewhere around there, like you see, like the saturation starts to bring in together, and now the hue of the hand perfectly matches that of the face. So this is the before, and this is the after. It's a subtle difference maybe, but it does make a difference when you have all of these subtle adjustments, and all together they're making a great edit, or like a good edit at least. And it's better just to approach these different things in different layers. And it's in general more preferable, in my opinion at least, to just use simple adjustment, very localized, rather than just having a background and applying all sorts of adjustments just on top of each other, because then they're going to contradict each other, they're going to be fighting each other for power, and that typically doesn't roll out okay. But if you use simple adjustments, localized, and knowing what they do, you're going to get probably better results. So that's another subtle adjustments going on top of the other subtle adjustments. And let's take a look again at the before and after, see where we are at. So this is before, this is after. I think Pete Manra that was asking about the cursor tool. It's probably that you're not seeing the whole of my interface. So check your settings maybe, because it should be that you're seeing my cursor tool on the top right corner of the Capture One interface, where you see the before and after, the grid and the exposure warnings and all that sort of stuff. So before and after. This is where we're going at. I'm really satisfied with the overall result. And, I think that we could just call it a day here. We still have time for some other tweaks. If you're still in need for more, or in the mood for more. So I'm going to be showing you a couple other tricks. So first of all, I will try to show you some style brushes to do things like dodging and burning. And then I'm going to be showing you how to do some healing in Capture One, because we're doing portraits, and some of you might be wondering, okay, so are we getting any tools to like clean the skin out or something like that? And the answer is yes, we have some tools for doing that. Before moving on to the dodge and burning, to the healing and cloning, I wanted to show you the dodge and burn. So here, right underneath the layer panel, we have a tool called style brushes. And I think personally that style brushes are brilliant, because they just let you do so much just with the pre-made style brushes that come the moment you install Capture One. And you have tons of this really cool style brushes for effects, for color, for light and contrast. So for example, there's this one in the enhancements part called Iris Enhance. And that's just gonna help us, you know, I should probably zoom in a little bit for this, but yeah, I'm just gonna show you roughly how it works. Yeah, so you have this Iris Enhance. That's just basically going to add some extra saturation and some extra brightness to the iris. So before and after, probably need to delete a little bit from here, but you see just with a brush stroke, we got actually a very nice effect. Oopsie, I think I activated some auto mask by default. Probably need to turn that off. Let me see. Yeah, I'm not sure where that went. Okay, anyways. So yeah, you have this Iris Enhance, for example, that is very powerful, very simple way to, you know, put a little bit more interest on the eyes. But then what I wanted to show you actually was the dodge and burn. So here on the light and contrast part, you have a brush for burning and a brush for dodging. Typically, I tend to start with the burning. Just, you know, that's the way I do it. Might be that you're starting from the dodging, it's totally okay. So the way I do the dodge and burning, so the thing with these brushes is that the flow by default comes very low. It means that you need to insist on a part of the image, you need to brush it in consistently to actually see an effect going on. So it's going to be basically like drawing with a pencil. So the more brush strokes you make, the harder and the more visible the effect is going to be. So brush, burning brush. And the way I like to do this is just by taking advantage of the natural lights and shadows on this photo. So for example, if there is like a shadow here, I'm going to just enhance the shadow. For example, on the beard side of things, we have like some baldish spots. So it might be a good option to just make some part of the beard a little bit more dark, and that makes it look like, you know, a nice beard. Yeah, somewhere around there. Then what other things we might want to increase on this burning? So for example, I really like this shadow being projected from the window. So I'm going to try to enhance this effect to make it like very dramatic. So some other things, let's just zoom in a little bit, see what we can find. So same thing that we did with the beard, we can also do, for example, here, try to have like a very hairy, perfectly retouched beard, something like that. Then what can we do? We can do the same thing with the eyebrows. We don't want to increase the shadows underneath the eyes because they're going to make the guy look tired, and that's what we don't want to do. But something we can do is like kind of subtly increase some of these shadows here, like the shadows that already exist, because they're going to give us more volume, or like more like a tri-dimensional feel. So something around there. What other things we can do? So for example, we can play around with the brush and kind of get like a undefined kind of vignette instead of just going for the actual generic boring round vignette. We can just brush in, you know, like this, or maybe we can just like increase the dramaticness. I don't know if that's a word actually, but I hope you understand. So this kind of shadow that's being cast here on the wall. So the same thing again that we did, just like making it a little bit more dramatic. So somewhere around there, it seems like we are not doing much, but when you actually see the before this layer, wow, that's some pretty intense effect. If we went too far, remember, we can just toggle it down a little bit, but I think it looks fine. Look at that beard. That's like a good, healthy beard, right? I'm not a beard expert, but you know, looks good in my opinion. So, right, we have our burning, and now we need to do our dodging in order to compensate for the extra shadows we've created. So when, you know, when there's dark, there's going to be light, and, you know, the balance of the world, the yin and yang and this kind of stuff. So we're going to be doing the dodging also. So with the dodging, I make like the same approach plus some little tweaks. So first of all, as I did before, I'm going to be focusing on the part of the image where the light is falling naturally. So for example, here on this side of the nose, here, this little shine on the lip. So here, see, for example, here, this is going to maybe help us like create this, like even increase like the drama of this like shadow being cast in the middle of the face, some extra light around the eyes, not so much here because that's in the middle of the shadow. So yeah, we could also do it like ears, whatever, that depends on how long you have to edit this picture or how long you want to spend doing it. But yeah, I think that's generally okay. Like it's not that much of an effect. Maybe a little bit more, let's say here, as I said, just to compensate the extra shadows we've created, maybe a little bit more on this side, because this is like where the light is falling off from the window. So it's probably a good idea just to create some extra contrast around this part, or maybe even like this reflection. So you see, like the whole point is like you're trying to enhance the shadows and the lights that are already there. So now this is a before, this is the after, this is probably a little bit more balanced. And there's actually an extra nice trick that we can do with this brush, which is, you know, we have like this little expression lines, or like these little bags underneath the eyes. Some people like to clone them away. Typically what I prefer to do is dodging them. So just to make this part a little bit brighter. And that's going to give us a very natural feel of retouch, because the line is there and it doesn't change the structure of the face. It's just like, it kind of refreshes it up a little bit. Let's see what I mean. So for example, this little shadow underneath the eye, that's making this beautiful model look a little bit tired, like he didn't have a good night's sleep. So if we are able to just fix that just by casting on some light on post-po, then we are probably able to make him look a little bit more rested. So somewhere around there. Oh my God, like I need to format my computer and it's like about to explode at this point with the streaming and so on. But I hope that you can see the effect just right. Okay, so about there. So then maybe also a little bit, I'm going to go for a more subtle effect here. So around 3% flow and 0% hardness. So, and then maybe just a little bit underneath the eye, right underneath the eye. Make sure you're not invading the actual light parts, because then you're going to get like weird effects. So you need to be playing around with the size of the brush constantly. As I'm doing it, in case you were wondering, there's a shortcut for that I'm using constantly, and it's pressing Control+Option, and then you can just slide on your graphic tablet or your mouse or whatever it is. Right, so just an example here. Let's see, this is before, this is after. You see what I mean? Like the structure of the face is the same. You can still feel that something's going on there. Like there is a line naturally, but it's not as strong right now. And it kind of helps to, you know, just make him look a little bit more refreshed. Same thing with here, maybe also a little bit here. Not too much though, because we have this dramatic shadow. And then if we do it too much, then we're going to be giving ourselves away. So yeah, that's probably something that you want to try and see how that works for you. You need to have a little bit of patience and be a little bit more specific, but yeah, that would work. So this is the dodge and burn. Let's go all the way down, and let's see the before these adjustments, before the local adjustments. So this is where we were left at. I mean, I'm going to do like the whole layer thing if you want. So this is the original profile. Then we did the basic adjustment. Well, first we did the cropping actually. So that would be the cropping. Then we did the basic adjustments. Then we did the color. Then we kind of balanced the hand a little bit roughly. Then we did the whole skin tone correction that brought everything together. Then we did the iris and hands. And then we did the burning and the dodging. And this is where we are at now. You see, like, it's a huge difference where we came from to where we are at. And, you know, it makes me more look like a little bit more, like the look is more intense because of the shadows that we added, or like we didn't add any shadows really. We just empowered what was already there. So it was there. Maybe I would just even like take again this brush and, make this cheekbone a little bit more feel. So that's kind of like sculpting the face a little bit, making like for a more direct look, and trying to tell a story with these colors, with this dramatic shadows, and so on and so on. So that's probably something that I'm happy with. Now let's open the floor for questions and answers, and while some things are coming up, I'm just going to be doing the healing meanwhile, if you agree with this approach, because then I can give you some time to write questions and answers. If we want to do the healing, it's very simple. There's just this healing brush here that you can just take, and then you will just choose a sample with letter Alt, and Capture One is going to reproduce the color and the light from the surroundings of the things that you want to heal. So just make sure to pick something that has a similar texture. So for example, here I would pick like somewhere from around there. And yeah, I'm just going to be doing this with the little and the wider spots. So yeah, just opening the floor now. Let me know what questions you have. You have any feedback? Was it useful? Was it too fast?
Yeah, let us know in the comments section or in the chat section. We want to know what questions you have. Maria, in your own experience, how often do you use the healing brush?
Well, to be honest, not very often. If I'm doing something like personal work that I really want to work through, or like I would do the same if I had like any commissions for like actual retouch portraits, I wouldn't do it in Capture One. I would just take it to Photoshop, which fortunately we can do in a very easy way. You can just right click, edit with Photoshop, and that would just create a PSD file. You can just jump right on to work with Photoshop. So that's what I do. I do my healing in Photoshop because it's faster. You're not working with a raw file anymore. You're working with an image file, which makes it so much softer for the processor. And also because you want to use other tools that Photoshop is capable of doing and Capture One is not, because it's not meant to be a retouch software. So when would I actually use this healing and cloning tools in Capture One? So I would use it if I have like a bunch of photos that I need to work all together, and the faces are like far away, or like it's not going to be so visible, or it's going for social media, so no one really cares because it's like so low resolution and no one's actually going to see what's going on. Then I would use the healing and cloning in Capture One because it's just faster to work in one software. But if I had to like retouch this photo very thoroughly, I would go to Photoshop, just as I said, edit with Photoshop, and then there you go. It's ready to go.
Yeah, that was good. I saw another question, and it was saying that or was a comment and a question saying that the orange was a little distracting, and so I'm wondering if they wanted to know, could you make that less dramatic? I know there are ways to manipulate colors, specific colors, so I'm wondering if that could be changed to maybe a I like the way it looks, but I'm wondering if that could be shifted to a different hue, maybe, or maybe even pulled down the saturation even.
Definitely, that's a very valid point, and Roland is probably right. It's now that he said it's a little bit too distracting probably, so let's just do a new empty layer. I think there is different ways to do this. I think that the most straightforward would be just creating a new layer using a linear gradient. Then let's gonna pull the gradient from this side. Let's see on the mask how we are doing. We want to make sure it's not affecting the face, or it's affecting this face as little as possible. And then we can simply work with the basic color editor, pick the orange hue, and then desaturate a little bit, maybe desaturating, and then maybe a shade of orange that is not like radioactive orange would be a good choice here. So somewhere a little bit more towards the yellow side of things, and bringing down the saturation, I think that would probably do the trick. And actually, I agree, this looks much better. So thanks for the suggestion. Okay, another question. How much blemish removal do you usually do? Well, depends on how much I think I need to do. So if I see something that really bothers me, then I would, of course, address it. Probably I could do probably some parts here are still like a little bit too, it's not a blemish anymore because it's not red, but there was like this weird cast going on, and probably I could reduce it a little bit here on the face, about like the little defects and stuff like that. I typically tend to take away whatever is not permanent. So you've got like a pimple or something like that, or a spot, like because you had like a hit or something like that, and it's something like it's not permanent, it doesn't belong in your face. I would typically remove it, but I would leave actually remove some. I don't know why I did that, but typically I would leave like things like birthmarks and stuff like that because they don't bother me. And about wrinkles, what I would tend to do would be like to soften them a little bit, but not to completely remove them, because again, it changes the structure of the face, and then you can get to awkward situation where the person says, well, that doesn't really look like myself because you took it a little bit too far. Okay, more questions. Great info, learning a number of things. Thanks, Dan. Could you offer insights into the other style brushes besides Touch and Burn? Okay, there is a lot of stuff to play around with. So my recommendation would be just display the whole stuff and see what catches your eye. There is a lot of stuff going on here that it's really, really useful. So for example, on the color side, we have the cool balance and the warm balance, removing or increasing saturation. This could actually have been another way in which we address this radioactive orange here on the window. So we could have easily just picked this brush and brush it all over the window. That would have worked. In Capture One, there's typically different ways to get to the same or almost the same result. Here on the enhancement side of things, I typically use the most the iris enhance and the add detail. That's really useful when you have a photo where you have something that is very much on focus and something that is out of focus. And I would use this brush as opposed to adding clarity to the whole thing, because that would get you to the point that you have some things that are in focus that you really want the detail to be shining, and some other part of the photo, if they're out of focus and you add clarity, they're going to be creating artifacts or looking a little bit weird. So that's something I use a lot. And here on the light and contrast sides, I use the most the Touch and Burn, but there's all sorts of useful stuff here. So just check it out. Don't be afraid to experiment. And if you don't like it, just reset the whole thing. That's fine. Okay, Chris Hamilton's asking, where can I see the previous tutorials? I think they're all stored here in the YouTube channel. Is that right?
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. Yes. Here on YouTube, and go to the playlists. So these are our live streams that we've had in the past. It's going to be show up in the playlist as well as go to the videos and live videos. So you can watch all of the ones we've done in the past, as well as I'm seeing, Maria, you have your own YouTube channel, but it is in Spanish. So if you speak Spanish, that's going to be useful. If not,
Yes.
then you can always learn Spanish and then watch Maria's videos.
Absolutely. It's a very useful language to learn, though.
Yes. And then also, if you just search for Capture One, Liz, feel free to chime in if you have any additional information. Capture One has a lot of videos. Obviously, they made the software, so they have a lot of videos, different subject matter that we may not be covering here. There it is. There's the Capture One logo.
Yeah,
But
there is all of these social accounts down here. If you want to like follow us on Instagram, on Facebook, YouTube, there is, as he was saying, there is lots of very useful tutorials, live sessions weekly on Capture One DK. That's our official YouTube channel. And, you can learn all sorts of stuff there with, like, some videos are with me, some are with my colleague, David Grover. So just go in, dive in, see what you like, what you want to like get experts on.
And Maria did a takeover on the Capture One Instagram stories yesterday. So that's really, it was really fun to check that out. People were asking her all these questions and she was answering. So if you want to learn more about Capture One that way, definitely check out those stories.
Absolutely. And there are very good articles on the Capture One website, on the, I believe on the blog somewhere. I forget exactly where that is, Liz. But there are some great articles if you want to just learn one specific thing or one specific part about the interface. They are very easily, readable. You can, read just a few in just a matter of a half an hour. You can just, it's very digestible.
Exactly. I will see if I can add a link into the chat on YouTube. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but I'll give it a shot so you guys can have a quick reference for that.
Absolutely. Let me see if there are any other questions. And yes, this is being recorded, so you will be able to watch it later. So feel free to go back over here, fill in any notes that you may have missed. And feel free to follow not only Bedford here, subscribe here on YouTube, but as well as Capture One. Capture One has a lot of different social media, or a pretty wide social media presence. So go ahead and follow them, especially on their Instagram page. They post a lot of other people's photos that they've edited with Capture One, and it's really cool to get some inspiration, see what other people have done.
Yes, and you can also get featured.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we should tell them about that, Maria.
I don't know the details, unfortunately. No,
I'm not sure the details, but if you go to Capture One,
Yes,
Instagram, Facebook, basically any social media channel, they just launched a photo contest. So you can actually enter a photo. They're looking for a variety of different things. So check it out. The details are on there, but it would be for the splash page. So they're looking for an image for the splash page when you load Capture One. So that'll be really fun to check out some of those entries. So definitely go check out the social media channels. And if some of you are still thinking about trying Capture One or purchasing Capture One, definitely check in with your friends at Bedford. You can purchase Capture One online through their website, or you can go into any of the stores and they can help you out. There's also an exclusive Capture One bundle. It's a full version of Capture One, but it's a special exclusive pricing through a reseller. So if you're picking up a tripod, a camera, or any other accessory, you can get Capture One for $179. So that's a really great deal. So definitely give them a call or check it out online. I will try to add the link in YouTube and we'll see if it works. Sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't, but I'll go ahead and give it a shot.
Absolutely. Let's see if there are any other questions before we let everyone go. Yeah, I'm not seeing any other questions. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to us on any of our social media platforms, as well as Liz and Maria. Capture One's pretty, they're on top of it. So if you have any questions, reach out to them, reach out to us, call us, come into one of our stores. We want to help you out.
Thank you for having us. It was super fun to be here again, and let's hope to get some more classes up very soon.
Thank
Absolutely.
you, everyone. Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Tyler. Take care. Till next time.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.